as you know, I'm done with my Fast and Furious reviews. Now I continue on with the Marvel movies leading up to the Avengers Age of Ultron. But now I'm on to the Phase 2 movies, starting with Iron Man 3. And as I did for Fast and Furious 6, I had already did a review of that movie, so I did a spoiler review, and so I'm doing that with the Marvel Phase 2 movies because I already did normal reviews of those, so I'm just going to do spoiler reviews. So if you haven't seen Iron Man 3, the link to my spoiler-free review is in the description below. So now, let's talk about some of Iron Man 3 spoilers. Now, Iron Man 3, it is the first movie of Marvel Phase 2 leading up to the Avengers Age of Ultron. And I like how the movie starts up. We're in Switzerland at a New Year's Eve party in Switzerland. Tony Stark, he's hanging out with Maya Hansen, who's played by Rebecca Hall. Now, during this scene, this also makes up for a cool cameo by the guy who plays Jensen in the first movie. And after all, in the first movie, Jensen said that he met Tony Stark at a New Year's Eve party. But Tony Stark also meets crippled Aldrich Killian. Aldrich Killian offers Tony Stark a spot on his company called Advanced Ideas Mechanics, AIM, but Tony Stark rejects him. And I like the tagline that Tony Stark gives throughout this whole story is that in that very moment, he created demons. And eventually they will show up in the future. Now we cut to present day. Tony Stark, it's been a year since the events in the Avengers. Tony Stark, he's having panic attacks from the events in the Avengers. And I like that they went that route because, you know, you don't just fight an alien race and then go up a wormhole without that having a mental breakdown on you. And this even affects his relationship with Pepper Potts. Because all Tony does is create suits, and that begins to take a toll on their relationship. And she doesn't understand why Tony Stark does so. And I like their dynamic in this movie, and this is probably the best Tony Stark and Pepper Potts movie together. Now throughout all this, there has been a string of bombings happening throughout the world, and they're all led by the Mandarin. And there's even a bombing at the Chinese theater, which one of Tony Stark's best friends, Happy Hogan, he is a part of, and he is badly injured and hospitalized. Tony finds out and he is not happy about this. So what does Tony does? He gets on live television and he tells the Mandarin, "Hey bro, here's my address. Come at me, bro." And so the Mandarin does come at his address and he bombs the place. And from there, Tony Stark is separated from Pepper Potts, who was with Maya Hansen at the moment because she came to Tony Stark to visit him to ask for his help. But Tony manages to escape and he is taken to Tennessee where he goes to investigate the bombings by the Mandarin. Tony Stark's Mark 42 Iron Man armor is shut down, it's out of power, and the world thinks he's dead. And so Tony Stark, he teams up with this little boy called Harley. And I'm telling you, this kid, like most people, they hate child actors. Like, I understand, but at the same time, it's like child actors, they're annoying and they don't know how to act, but there are some rare exceptions. And this kid, Harley, he is definitely an exception, and I like the banter between him and Tony Stark and the way he interacts with him. Like, there's this one scene with them, he explains to Tony Stark where his parents are, and the kid is like, "Well, my father, he went to go pick up some scratches, but I guess he won the lottery, because that was 10 years ago. And then Tony Stark, he's like, "Well, hey, father figures leave, don't need to be a pussy about it." And I was just like, did he really just say that? I'm not going to hate you for it, but like, I couldn't say that, but you just did. I love when Tony interacts with him because he just spits sarcasm at him all the way. And so the kid helps Tony Stark investigate the bombings, and it turns out they are not actual bombs, they are former military soldiers, subjected to the extremists, which at certain stages can cause subjects to explode. After veterans started exploding, these explosives were falsely attributed to the terrorists in order to cover up the extremists' flaws. And Stark witnesses the extremists firsthand when he goes up against Brad and Savin, who are former military soldiers, and they attack him. And that definitely made up for a cool action scene. After this, Tony traces the Mandarin back to Miami, and he calls up his best friend Rhodey to help him take him down. Now, let's talk about Rhodey for a sec. As I said in my original review, I loved Rhodey more in this movie than I did the other movies, and they gave him more to do in this movie. In this movie, he went from War Machine to Iron Patriot, and they did so because he's the one that's helping investigate the Mandarin. And so they wanted to make the War Machine more settled, so they called him the Iron Patriot. And I love Rhodey and Tony Stark together in this movie. Their relationship in this movie is more functional than it was in the other movies. And I like that Shane Black, who's the director of this movie, he made them more so like a buddy cop type relationship. And I love Don Cheadle in this movie. Like, by this movie, he definitely came into his own as Rhodey. And I'll even say, hey, Team Don Cheadle as Rhodey. Sorry, Terrence Howard. I'm pretty sure Terrence Howard, he's looking at these movies and watching how much movie they make, and he's probably sitting at home like, Damn. That could have been May. But hey, he's on the show Empire, and that show's really successful right now, so hey, the world balances out for him at least. Now, jumping back to here, Pepper and Maya, they're at the hotel, but Aldrich Killian fights them over there. Now, Aldrich Killian, he was there in the beginning of the film, and he actually knows Pepper Potts because they were like college students together. And Maya Hansen, she's actually the one behind the extremis. What the extremis is, it helps you regenerate limbs. And the best subjects were military veterans, because they probably lost an arm or a leg or something. And Aldrich Killian, he helped her finance it with his company, AIM, Advanced Ideas Mechanics. And so Aldrich Killian and Maya Hansen, they're both behind the bombings, aka the soldiers blowing up. But the extremis, it doesn't work on everybody. If it rejects you, you're just going to blow us up. Hence why they're blowing up. But if it doesn't reject you, it'll accept you, and then you'll have the power to control extreme heat or regenerate fire through your mouth or whatever. And so Aldrich Killian, he kidnaps Pepper to test it on her. Now jumping back to over here, Tony Stark, he's on his way to Miami to infiltrate the Mandarin's base. He left his Mark 42 armor in Tennessee for it to charge up with Harley. And so he calls up Harley to ask, hey yo, how is it charging up? And then Harley's like, no, it's not fully charged yet. And then Tony Stark, he starts having panic attacks again. And I actually love this little scene right there, because one of the things I said in my original view is about Tony Stark, he's coming into terms that his intellect is his greatest weapon. And I know some people had a lot of problems with this movie because this is more so the Tony Stark show than the Iron Man show, and we don't get enough Iron Man. And hey, like I said before, the first movie is the origin story. The second movie is where we get a little bit of both, and it's well balanced. And the third movie is when Tony Stark, he starts to realize why he became Iron Man or whatever, and what his greatest weapon is. And that's one of the things I can appreciate about this movie. And so when Tony Stark, he's having a panic attack, Harley, he walks him through it, and he tells him just build something. And then Tony calms down, and then he goes to his little hardware store, and he makes something out of nothing. Just like he did in the first Iron Man. And so Tony, he finally gets to the base where the Mandarin is. And so he confronts the Mandarin. So now let's talk about the Mandarin. Because you know that's what you really want to hear me talk about. I said something happens in this movie that if you're a diehard Iron Man fan, you're going to be like, no! No! What the fuck are you doing? And it's going to divide the fans, and people are either going to roll with it or you're just not going to roll with it. Now, first off, I love Ben Kingsley as the Mandarin in this movie. And he would make a great villain, just not the villain that he was in this movie. Look, when I first saw the trailers in this movie, when this movie was getting ready to come out, I was excited. And I saw Ben Kingsley in this movie, you know. And I was excited because, you know, he'd be like, some people call me a terrorist. I consider myself a teacher. You'll never see me coming. When I first saw it, he was like, yeah, he's like a more menacing version of Osama bin Laden. And then when Tony Stark finally meets him, he's like, whoop, wouldn't want to be in there for 13 minutes. Oh, bloody hell, bloody hell, bloody hell, bloody hell. After that, I was like, who the fuck is this? And then he just continues on. He's like, my name is Trevor Slattery, and I'm an actor. See, the Mandarin, he's not real. And Tony Stark's like, well, what do you mean he's not real? And he's like, well, he's real, but he's not here. He's here, but he's not here. He's here, but he's not here. The Mandarin, he's just this pill-popping actor, and he's real eccentric, and he's played by Ben Kingsley, nonetheless. So, you know, he was menacing when he needed to be menacing, and he was some weird, creep-ass actor when he needed to be. The Mandarin is this menacing figure created by Aldrich Killian to put a face to all the bombings. The U.S. government is looking for him. They'll be like, oh, hey, we need to get him. And so they just be chasing their tail. Now, if you really think about it, it is kind of smart, you know? When I saw it in theater, it was like, yeah, that's pretty tight. I could see that happening like James Bond or Mission Impossible or some spy movie or some shit. But doing that to an iconic character in comic book lore, yeah, not so much. I mean, at the end of the day, was it smart for the movie? Yeah, sure, it's a smart play for a villain to do. Now, with that being said, shitting in the hearts of all the hardcore Iron Man Mandarin fans, probably a mistake. I'd say if you're gonna do something like this, then at least replace the fake Mandarin with a real Mandarin. Like in Fast and Furious 4, and spoiler for anyone who hasn't seen Fast and Furious 4, he kept teasing this guy named Braga. He's someone who's really running the drug cartel. And then when Vin Diesel and Paul Walker, they finally get to meet Braga, and then they realize that ain't Braga. And then the camera pans to Capos, he is really Braga. Well, you watch him like, oh, yep, that is wow. I can't. Yep, and you have a checklist of everything, and he fits him better than the guy that's pretending to be Braga. And yep, that blows my mind, and I can't believe they really pulled that on us, and that makes me feel like an idiot. Or here, if you want a better reference, in Batman Begins, you got Ra's al Ghul, and Ra's al Ghul dies, and then you're like, well, I guess that's the end of him. But then what if Ra's al Ghul is immortal? And then it's Liam Neeson who's Ra's al Ghul. I'm like, oh, yep, that's him. Yep, checklist, and he fits him better than the last guy. Yep, he's clearly Ra's al Ghul, and that blows my mind that I didn't figure that out, and that makes me feel like an idiot as well. And in those two movies, it worked, but in this movie, they didn't have no replacement. It's just the Mandarin, he's BS. The character that you all loved, who is the Mandarin, he is not here. And later on in the movie, when Aldrich Killian, he says, "You're looking for the Mandarin? I am the Mandarin!" I never really took that as he is the Mandarin, as in the real Mandarin. I just took that as, well, if you're looking for the guy who's running everything and pulling all the strings and whatever, I am him, so metaphorically speaking, I am the Mandarin. It's not like the Ra's al Ghul thing in Batman Begins or the Braga thing in Fast and Furious. Now back to the story, Aldrich Killian, he created the Mandarin to put a face to all the bombings, so he is the true villain. And despite all the Mandarin stuff, Aldrich Killian, he's actually one of my favorite villains within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, even though his backstory is similar to Syndrome's from The Incredibles. He met his hero, but then his hero rejected him, and so he grows up regret and hate and resenting him, and so he goes to get revenge on him. Syndrome is Aldrich Killian. But despite that, I still like Guy Pearce as Aldrich Killian. He was menacing when he needed to be menacing, even when he's talking to Tony Stark and confronting him and telling him all his plans. It's like, that scene right there, I like it, because that is true villainy right there. And I like that he's calculated and has everything figured out. So he steals Rhodey's Iron Patriot suit so he can kidnap the president off of the Air Force One plane. Iron Man saves the remaining passengers on the plane, but he missed the president. So Tony and Rhodey, they team up to go save Pepper and the president. So Aldrich Killian, he intends to kill the president on live television so that the vice president can become the president for the extremist cure on his disabled daughter. Stark goes to save Pepper, Rhodey goes to save the president. Stark goes to save Pepper, Rhodey goes to save the president, and he gets him to safety, and he gets his Iron Patriot suit back. And Tony Stark, he has Jarvis summon all his Iron Man suits that he's made over the past couple of months. And that made for a sweet climax. I love this entire sequence. Just seeing suits coming up everywhere and just taking out all the extremist soldiers left and right. And even that shot where they all come up, that was the money shot. And they should have just put a hashtag said, "Ain't nobody fucking with my clique." And so Tony, he goes to save Pepper, but before he saves her, she falls presumably to her death. And so Tony goes to fight Aldrich Killian. His Mark 42 suit comes, and he puts this on Aldrich Killian, and has Jarvis blows it up, therefore presumably killing Aldrich Killian. But apparently Aldrich Killian, he's still alive. He's about to kill Tony, at the scene where he says, "I am the Mandarin!" But then Pepper comes out of nowhere and intervenes, and it was cool seeing Pepper Potts get some action. The extremists did not reject her, so now she's kicking ass, and she kills Aldrich Killian. After the battle, Tony and Pepper, they make up, and he orders Jarvis to blow up all his suits as a sign of his devotion to Pepper. And so after that, the Vice President and Trevor Slattery, aka the fake Mandarin, they get arrested. Pepper gets the extremists ejected out of her body, and then Tony Stark, he also gets the Iron Man arc reactor taken off his chest and gets all the shrapnel from his heart, and he throws the arc reactor in the ocean. And one of the last lines it says in the movie is that he will always be Iron Man. Now the end credit scene, it is one of my least favorite end credit scenes. Throughout the movie, Tony Stark, he's been the narrator of the movie, and then it's revealed that he's having a therapy session with Dr. Bruce Banner, aka the Hulk. And Bruce Banner, he fell asleep while listening to Tony's story. Now, was it funny? Yes, but was it worth sitting through all the credits just to see something that possibly leads into the next movie? No, it was not worth it. But hey, they make up at the very end of the movie where their last title card says, Tony Stark will return. And at the time this movie came out, we wasn't sure if Robert Downey Jr. he was going to return for another Iron Man movie or any Marvel movie at that, because his contract had expired. But he got a renewal, and now he's in for a couple more Avengers movies and Captain America Civil War. In conclusion, Iron Man 3, it is my favorite Iron Man sequel, but it is my least favorite of the Phase 2 Marvel movie. But I still enjoyed it as a Marvel movie, a movie in general, and as a Shane Black movie. Shane Black, he's the guy who directed this movie after Jon Favreau directed the first two movies. So hats off to him for making this movie work and making this movie funny than honestly it should have been. There's not enough Iron Man in the movie, but the story itself makes up for it in the end. And the Tony Stark stuff was good. They gave Rhodey more to do. They gave Pepper more to do. I like the villain. I like the plot of the movie. And the Mandarin stuff I can get over, but if you can't, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. And if you make the argument, well then, Mandarin does not exist in this universe. Well, the thing is, the Mandarin does exist. And instead of being everything that you've come to know of him, badass martial artist, alien technology. He's an actor from Beverly Hills. But luckily, I'm glad there was someone at the studio who had the good sense to say, alright, clearly the fans are mad, so let's make a Marvel one-shot called All Hail the King and reveal that there's actually a real Mandarin. So I'm glad someone at the studio said, hey, let's make this so we can clear this up. Hell, the person who came up with that was probably the person who was like, yeah, guys, if we do this, there's gonna be some fan backlash. But nonetheless, I still had fun with the movie was entertaining. I'm just saying, they probably shouldn't have done what they did with the Mandarin. I gave this movie an A+ for full price, so I stand by that rating. My question to you is, how do you feel about what they did with the Mandarin in this movie? Did you like it or did you not like it? However you feel, leave a comment below. That's it for the day. Like what you see, subscribe to this channel, subscribe to my other channel. The links are in the description below. And be sure to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram. Peace.